the Persian Gulf, a stretch of water that is both a lifeline and, honestly, a powder keg. In the early hours of February 2026, the USS Hartley, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, cut through these dark, tense waters. Its mission was a familiar one for the U.S. Navy, freedom of navigation. For 6 long weeks, its crew of 329 sailors had been a visible American presence, a steel-gray ghost shadowing Iranian naval movements near the choke point of the world, the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the planet's oil flows through this narrow passage. Any disruption here sends shockwaves across the globe, making the Hartley's job absolutely critical. On this particular night, the Hartley was operating at the very edge of its leash. It was 380 miles south of its carrier strike group, a calculated risk that pushed the boundaries of its protective umbrella. The ship was a formidable weapon of war, a 9,700-ton fortress armed with 96 vertical launch cells, packed with Tomahawk cruise missiles and SM-2 interceptors. Its AN/SPY-1D radar, the heart of the Aegis combat system, was a vigilant eye, constantly scanning the skies. But distance creates vulnerability. The crew knew it. The Iranians knew it too. They had been watching, timing, and waiting for the perfect moment. The mood on the bridge was one of routine professionalism. The sailors were well drilled, accustomed to the constant low-level tension of operating so close to a potential adversary. They had seen Iranian fast attack boats before, heard the chatter over the radio, and watched the coastline light up with radar emissions. These were the daily realities of their deployment. But beneath the surface of this routine, a new and more dangerous game was being played. The Hartley's predictable patrol patterns, designed to show presence and deter aggression, were being studied and turned into a weapon against it. Unseen by the crew, Iranian analysts had identified a critical window. A sliver of time, just 90 seconds long, when the Hartley was at its furthest point from friendly air cover. This was the gap they intended to exploit. The ship, a symbol of American power and reach, was being lined up in the crosshairs. The sailors aboard, from the captain on the bridge to the engineers deep in the hull, were going about their duties, completely unaware that their lonely vigil was about to be shattered by an act of war. The calm before the storm was about to end. For 72 hours, the Iranian coastline was a hive of activity. To the outside world, it looked like business as usual. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps was conducting yet another military exercise. Missile transporter trucks rumbled along coastal roads in broad daylight. Radar installations pulsed with energy, their emissions carefully calibrated to match the electronic signature of previous training drills. This wasn't just practice, it was performance. A carefully staged piece of military theater designed to lull their observers into a false sense of security. It was a strategy of pattern masking, and it was dangerously effective. U.S. Central Command, watching the activity from afar, saw nothing out of the ordinary. The movements on the ground, the electronic signals in the air, it all fit a familiar pattern. They had seen 6 similar drills that year alone. The intelligence analysts logged the activity, tagged it, and classified it as elevated but non-hostile. It was a critical miscalculation. The warning signs were there, but they were hidden in plain sight, buried under a mountain of routine data. The urgent threat signal that should have been flashing red on a commander's screen never even reached combat priority. Iran was hiding its Dagger behind a curtain of noise. The real preparations were happening away from the prying eyes of satellites. 85 miles inland, hidden inside a nondescript warehouse district, a mobile launcher for a Fateh 3113 ballistic missile was being readied. This wasn't part of the show. This was the main event. The order for the attack would not come from a coastal command post, but from deep within a bunker complex, buried 200 feet beneath the Zagros Mountains. Here, in the secure heart of Iran's military apparatus, the final decision was made. The target was locked, the weapon was ready, and the deception had worked perfectly. This elaborate ruse revealed a dangerous evolution in Iranian tactics. They understood that modern warfare is fought not just with missiles, but with information. By overwhelming American intelligence with familiar patterns, they created an environment where an actual attack could be mistaken for just another drill. They were exploiting the system, turning the very processes designed to prevent conflict into a tool to initiate it. The USS Hartley, patrolling confidently in the Gulf, was sailing straight into a trap that had been weeks in the making. The deception was complete. The countdown had begun. At precisely 2:41 a.m. local time, the order was given. From its hiding place in the warehouse district, the Fateh 313 missile roared to life. A plume of fire and smoke tore through the roof of the building as the short-range ballistic missile, Iran's most advanced, began its deadly journey. It climbed steeply into the night sky, a streak of vengeance aimed at the unsuspecting American destroyer. The Fateh 313 is a serious piece of hardware. It carries a 450-kilogram high-explosive warhead and travels at a blistering terminal speed of Mach 4, 4 times the speed of sound. It was designed for one purpose: to hit hard and fast. Just 8 seconds after ignition, at an altitude of 40,000 feet, the missile appeared on the USS Hartley's radar screens. The Aegis combat system, the ship's electronic brain, instantly went to work. Algorithms processed the data in milliseconds, analyzing the trajectory, speed, and origin. The classification came back clear and terrifying: inbound ballistic threat. On the bridge and in the Combat Information Center, alarms blared. The calm of the routine patrol was shattered. The crew, trained for this exact moment, snapped into action. There was no panic, only the cold, focused precision of their drills. 7 seconds later, at 2:41:15 a.m., the Hartley fought back. An SM-2 Block 3A interceptor missile erupted from one of the ship's vertical launch cells. A flash of white light against the dark sea. It rocketed into the sky, its own computer locked onto the incoming Fateh 313. The SM-2 is a world-class defender with a near-perfect success rate in tests against standard ballistic targets. It was designed to be the ultimate shield. It climbed to meet the threat, calculating the precise point in space where it would obliterate the Iranian missile. The lives of the crew depended on this single, high-stakes intercept. But the Iranians had planned for this. Their engineers had added a deadly surprise to the Fateh 313's design. In the final 12 seconds of its flight, as it plunged back towards the ocean, the missile's terminal guidance system kicked in. It executed a shallow S-curve maneuver, a slight but significant deviation from its expected path. This tiny adjustment, just 0.4 degrees per second, was enough to fool the SM-2's tracking algorithm. The American interceptor, expecting a straight line, suddenly lost confidence in its target solution. It detonated 280 meters away from the Fateh 313. A near miss that was as good as a total failure. The Iranian warhead was unharmed and continued its silent, hypersonic dive toward the Hartley. At 2:41 and 23 seconds in the morning, the Fateh 313 slammed into the USS Hartley. The impact was absolutely catastrophic. The missile struck the port side, just 3 feet below the waterline, punching through the steel hull like it was paper. The 450-kilogram warhead detonated inside the ship, unleashing a tremendous blast that tore a gaping 14-foot hole. Seawater immediately began flooding into the vessel at a terrifying rate of 600 gallons per minute. The lights flickered and died as the ship shuddered violently, the sound of grinding metal and the concussive force of the explosion throwing sailors from their feet. The fight for the ship's life had just begun. The initial explosion triggered a devastating chain reaction. The blast wave ripped through bulkheads and into a nearby ammunition handling room, setting off a series of secondary explosions. These smaller, but still powerful blasts sent shrapnel flying through compartments and ignited fires on 3 separate decks. Thick, acrid smoke filled the passageways, making it almost impossible to see or breathe. Within just 2 minutes, the ship had taken on so much water that it was listing a dangerous 8 degrees to port. 17 sailors were wounded in the attack, 4 of them critically. The ship was bleeding, burning, and sinking. Amid all this chaos, the crew's training took over. Damage control teams, basically the ship's firefighters and first responders, raced towards the breach. They moved through darkened, smoke-filled corridors, their only light coming from headlamps and emergency battle lanterns. They had to fight fires, patch the hole, and pump out the incoming seawater, all while the ship was pitching and groaning around them. Medical teams scrambled to treat the wounded, setting up a triage station in the mess deck. Every sailor had a job to do. Their courage and discipline in these first few minutes were all that stood between the Hartley and the bottom of the Persian Gulf. The attack had also crippled the ship's ability to fight. The primary AN Spy-1D radar array, the very eyes of the Aegis system, was badly damaged. It was operating at only 60% capacity. The ship was hurt, but it was not helpless. Commander David Chen, the ship's captain, was on the bridge, trying to assess the situation while his crew fought to save his ship. He was faced with a horrifying reality. His destroyer was severely damaged, his crew was injured, and the enemy was still out there, watching from the darkness. The ship was in agony, but the battle was far from over. On the damaged bridge of the USS Hartley, Commander David Chen stood in the heart of a maelstrom. Alarms wailed, reports of flooding and fires crackled over the communications system, and the deck canted beneath his feet. He had just seen his ship torn apart by a missile that his multi-billion-dollar defense system failed to stop. His crew was hurt. His first responsibility was to save his ship, but he was also a warrior, and his ship had just been attacked. He had to decide, and he had to do it now. For a tense 43 seconds, he weighed his options: a proportional response or something more. The decision was made for him. At 2:44 in the morning, the Hartley's electronic warfare suite screamed a new warning. The surviving sensors detected a massive surge in enemy activity. Across a 150-mile stretch of the Iranian coast, multiple fire control radars were activating. These weren't training signals, these were targeting radars for Silkworm and Chinese-supplied C-802 anti-ship missile batteries at 4 separate sites. The Iranians were lighting up the Hartley, preparing to finish the job. They weren't just testing the waters, they were going for the kill. This was not a single, isolated strike. It was the prelude to a full-scale barrage. Commander Chen interpreted this new information for what it was: an imminent second wave of attacks. Any thought of a limited, proportional response vanished. A single missile for a single missile was no longer on the table. To do so would be to invite his own destruction. If he didn't act decisively, those Iranian batteries would unleash a swarm of sea-skimming missiles that his damaged ship might not be able to stop. He was faced with a stark choice: absorb another hit and potentially lose his ship and his crew, or go on the offensive and eliminate the threat before it could be unleashed. With ice-cold resolve, Commander Chen chose full retaliation. He wasn't just defending his ship anymore, he was taking the fight to the enemy. The standing rules of engagement gave him the authority to act in the face of a clear and present danger. The Iranian radar activity was that danger, written in bright, hostile lines on his tactical displays. He gave the order to prepare the Tomahawk cruise missiles. The USS Hartley, wounded and listing, was about to unleash its own storm. The commander's choice, made in less than a minute, would escalate the conflict and send a brutal message back to the Iranian coast. The order was given: execute strike package. Starting at 2:44 in the morning, the wounded USS Hartley began to strike back. Over the next 90 seconds, a sequence of 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles blasted out of their vertical launch cells. One by one, they ignited with a roar, their rocket boosters pushing them clear of the listing ship before their jet engines took over for the long flight to their targets. Each missile carried a 1,000-pound warhead, and each had a specific address. Commander Chen wasn't just shooting into the dark, he was systematically dismantling the network that had attacked him. The targets were carefully chosen. The Tomahawks were programmed to fly complex low-level routes to avoid detection. Their destinations included the original Fateh 313 launch facility, the 3 coastal missile batteries that had illuminated the Hartley, a Revolutionary Guard Naval Command Center, and a key radar installation. It was a comprehensive and devastating response, but the Hartley was not fighting alone. Modern naval warfare is a team sport. The ship's tactical data, including the targeting information for the Iranian batteries, was instantly shared across the secure Link 16 network. 67 nautical miles to the northwest, another Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the USS Tempest, received the data. Its commander saw the attack on a sister ship and the subsequent Iranian preparations for a second strike. Under the same standing rules of engagement, the Tempest joined the fight without needing to ask for permission. It launched an additional 8 Tomahawk missiles from its own decks. Its targets were different but equally important: 2 Iranian fast attack boat bases and a suspected underground command bunker. The American response was now coming from 2 directions: a coordinated hammer blow designed to cripple Iran's ability to continue the fight. At 2:58 in the morning, the first Tomahawks began to arrive. The warehouse complex that had hidden the Fateh 313 launcher was obliterated in a massive explosion, which in turn set off 6 other missiles stored inside. The effect was multiplied. On the coast, 3 of the 4 targeted anti-ship missile batteries were destroyed before they even had a chance to fire. The American retaliation was swift, precise, and overwhelming. It was a powerful demonstration of the U.S. Navy's reach and lethality. The hammer had fallen, and it had fallen hard. The battle for the USS Hartley was not over yet. 1 Iranian missile battery, shielded by terrain, had survived the initial Tomahawk strike. It managed to fire 2 C-802 anti-ship missiles at the crippled American destroyer. These were subsonic, sea-skimming weapons, harder to detect than a ballistic missile. But the Hartley's Aegis system, even at 60% capacity, was still in the fight. It detected the inbound threats at a range of 31 nautical miles. The crew, already battling fires and floods, now had to face another attack. This time, however, the system worked exactly as designed. 2 more SM-2 interceptors launched from the Hartley's decks. Unburdened by the complex terminal maneuvers of the Fateh 313, the interceptors locked onto the steady, linear paths of the C-802s. They closed the distance rapidly. At a range of 8,000 meters from the ship, a safe distance, both interceptors found their marks, destroying the incoming missiles in bright flashes of light over the dark water. The threat was neutralized. The ship and its crew had survived the second wave. The immediate danger had passed, leaving behind a burning, damaged ship and a dramatic escalation in the Persian Gulf. The Night of Fire in February 2026 became a brutal but vital lesson for the U.S. Navy. It highlighted the terrifying effectiveness of pattern masking and the critical importance of adaptable intelligence. Relying on past patterns had created a deadly blind spot. The incident proved that adversaries were becoming more sophisticated, capable of using deception to create opportunities for attack. Future operations would require a new level of vigilance, one that questioned routine activities and searched for the hidden threat within the noise. Readiness could no longer be just about having the best technology. It had to be about having the right mindset. Ultimately, the attack on the USS Hartley served as a stark reminder of the changing nature of naval warfare. The era of unchallenged American naval dominance was being tested by smart, adaptable adversaries with access to advanced missile technology. The failed intercept of the maneuvering Fateh 313 showed that even the most advanced defense systems need to constantly evolve to keep up with new threats. The survival of the Hartley, thanks to its well-trained crew and its layered defenses, underscored the importance of resilience. In the volatile waters of the 21st century, the ability to take a punch and fight back is just as important as having the power to land the first blow.